as of today, we don't have a major food crisis situation or a major food shortage situation. So we need to understand that Nigeria produces a lot of food, right? So there are certain issues which is not as big as it is made out to be, or as we think it to be. So we need to understand this from the right perspective. So to put a perspective to this, first of all, let us understand that Nigeria has around 68 million hectares of agricultural lands, out of which around 36 million hectares of land are arable lands, the so-called arable lands, which can be. And out of the 36 million hectares of arable lands, what we cultivate is around 28 million hectares of land. So there is still 8 million hectares of land which is available in case of any requirement for cultivation. But now I'm not suggesting here that we should use those lands for cultivation. Okay, so let's park that there, and then let us look at our population. Our population is almost 50% urban population, and the urbanization is growing, and hence our need for food going forward in the future is going to go up. Not only because of urbanization, because of population growth as well. So we are growing at around 2.1%, and hence there will be a lot of requirement of food as well as requirement for lands. And as urbanization happens, there are certain sections of the food commodity which will be required more than the others that we see today, right? Now let's look at what we produce. We produce almost 60-65 million tons of cassava. We produce almost 55 million tons of yam. We don't produce any wheat, but we consume a lot of wheat which is imported. So our climate conditions are not there, not the right climate conditions at the moment for producing wheat. So wheat is what is imported, which is fine, which we don't have, we import. So wheat is imported and processed into bread, into flour, which is further processed into made into bread and other things, right? The second thing which we don't have is enough. We don't have enough is rice. We produce around 8.2 million tons of paddy, which converts to around 5 million tons of rice. But our rice consumption is almost 8 million, 8.2 million, 8.3 million tons thereabout. So there is a gap there. Then we have a lot of maize, right? We produce almost 12.5 million tons of maize. But in all this, where does the problem lie, or where does the solution lie for that matter, is that our yields are very, very low. So there are few things which we need to address. If we address those problems, our food issues will go away, be it food self-sufficiency or the shortage that we see in certain commodities can be neutralized or can be assuaged by growing certain other foods where people can tap into. So just to give you an example, our paddy yields are just 2.2, 2.3 tons per hectare, whereas the world average of paddy is around 4.6, 4.7 tons. So instead of growing horizontally, as I mentioned in some other meetings which we had with some people, we were saying that we should grow vertically. That means how do we increase our farming yields? If we increase our yields, we have enough lands. Like what are we growing today? The current lands. We are having 3.5 million hectares. We cultivate 3.5, 3.6 million hectares of land today for cultivating paddy. So if we grow that yield to the world average, then we have enough food, enough rice, not only to cover the gap that we have today, which is roughly around 3 million tons of gap that we have, but we'll have more even to export, right, to the neighboring countries. So that is what we can achieve by improving those yields to at least bring it to the world average levels. The seeds that we use, the Faro 44s, the L31s and the L34s that we use in Nigeria and in West Africa, those seeds have the potential to give us at least a yield of 6.5 to 7 tons per hectare. So now we need to look back and say, how do we grow these yields to those levels? How can we ensure that the yields, the seeds yield to the potential, or at least 70-80% to the potential. So there are a lot of interferences that happens. There are a lot of other things which is there which can be solved for us to reach those kind of yields, right? So that needs to be looked at. Probably I'll explain that. The other thing we should look at is that maize, for example, we grow 12.5 million tons of maize. Our maize yields are around roughly 2 tons to a hectare. Our overall cereal yields are around 1.6 tons to a hectare, right? Whereas our maize yields are 2.1 tons to a hectare, whereas the world average for that is around 6.2 tons to a hectare, right? So there's a lot of room for growth that we can actually improve yield for maize, and maize can substitute. It's a food item after all, right? So it can substitute for whatever we don't have internally, but it will take time. It's not that something is going to happen overnight, but I believe that within 2 to 3 years, 2 to 4 years time, if we focus on improving the yields, this can happen. Let us also look at, since we are talking about the yields, let us also look at the yields of the largest commodity that we grow, which is cassava. We grow 60 to 65 million tons of cassava. But our average cassava yields are just 8.5, 9 tons to a hectare. Whereas just let's not go far into Asia and all, they get around 37, 38 tons of cassava to a hectare. Can you imagine that? Zambia, certain parts in Zambia gives us 27, 28 tons to a hectare. So what can we do there, right? So that is the first part, that how do we improve the yields of the farmer, the small scale farmers. Then again, how do we preserve the food that we produce? So it's just not that we have the yields, but the yields that we see on the farm, how do we ensure that that is actually translating into that food and it reaches our tables, our shelves and our tables, right? So a lot of work needs to be done there. A lot of focus needs to be brought in there as well. As I mentioned, the first part is to ensure that how do we improve the yields of the farmer, because the yields of the smallholder farmer, so 95%, almost 95% or more, if not more, at least 95% of our food is actually produced by smallholder farmers, right? So they are the people who need a lot of support from the government, from wherever that support, be it private institutions, DFIs and other donor institutions, as well as training and other needs are required in that field. So the primary most important part we need to address is that how do we improve the yields of the farmer. Then there are a lot of other support which the farmer needs, like our rural roads needs, road infrastructure needs upliftment. We need storage solutions for the farmer. Mechanization rates in the country is very, very low. So our mechanization rates are 0.01 horsepower per hectare, whereas the world average is 0.67 horsepower per hectare. So that means we don't have enough mechanization at the farm levels. So how do we ensure that the farmers use more tractors, more equipments to right from tilling their lands, that is the land preparation levels, to harvest during harvest, right? During harvest, the farmers lose a lot of crop, right? So a lot of yield is lost. So it's not that perhaps when you walk around you will see people who can see the crop and predict it. They can see that this is a very good yielding crop. But when the farmer harvests that crop, he may not get that yield because of the harvest losses that happens. Because of he is doing manual threshing for certain things, he is doing manually cutting out the pods of say cocoa or whatever it is. And hence he is losing a lot of crop which goes down, falls down in the field itself. A lot of it is damaged. So if mechanization can happen, if combined harvesters are brought into use, not only that it will improve the yield that actually otherwise would have lost. 20 to 30% of the yields are lost there. So that can be catered for. Then again, the other thing is that how do we now post-harvest, how do we, because post-harvest losses contribute to a lot of losses in terms of, the perishable, this is all perishable item. Just to give you an example, cassava for example. Cassava if it is not dried, processed within say 36 to 48 hours, it spoils because it's a tuber, it has 70% water in it. So a lot of crop of cassava which is harvested by the farmer gets damaged because of lack of storage facilities. So we have to develop storage facilities. The structure in the country is there. So there is the government structure wherein there is an agri ministry at the federal level, there is an agri ministry at the state level, and then it is again percolating down to the local government levels. The ministries are there, they know what is required to be done, extension services are required. So there is a structure that exists. So we have to use that same structure to ensure that if we can create agro-processing zones around these growing areas. So the Agri Ministry has the data of people, of farmers at every level. At to the last level, they have the data, which says that okay, these farmers have. These are the farmers. This is a farming. This is a commodity that they farm, and then we can sit down and say, okay, in these regions we can have this storage facility where the farmer can bring this produce and store it in this facility, and hence we can also have a processing zone wherein whatever processing is required for, if it is cassava, it is yam, it is paddy, it is whatever, they can be processed and stored further so that these don't perish. And then that will also bring in a lot of visibility at the government levels wherein we get data. This is also acts as a strategic grain reserve. If the infrastructure, rural road infrastructure is improved, then we can also see that a lot of access to market start from there, right? So the people who are buying can go and buy. They want to take it out and sell it somewhere else at the factory levels, they can do that. So that ecosystem can be improved. So all I'm trying to say is that when we talk about food insecurity or food insufficiency, we get into panic mode. But I believe that if we focus on the basics, we'll reach there. So the second part of your question, how do we bring in large scale farming into all this? How do you key in into all that? So first is to support what we already have. 95% of our food comes from the smallholders, and that is where a lot of employment is also generated. And again, as I said, mechanization. When we bring in mechanization at the doorstep of the farmer, you're also creating another layer of employment, because all those operators of tractors, the technicians and everyone. So there's a lot of job opportunity, which actually, is a multiplier on the economy, can also come into that place through that activity. Then the large scale farmers. Large scale farmers are definitely big companies or small companies or whatever size or mid-sized companies. They are willing to invest, provided the infrastructure is right. So in these growing zones, again, as I said, the basic thing is for us to ensure that the infrastructure is there. If the road infrastructure and the power infrastructure is there, industries will come. And then again, the security aspect. These three things have to be taken care of. That is the infrastructure mainly, because roads and the power. And the third part would be to ensure that there is enough security, which I believe the government is working on tirelessly. And we are seeing improvements in a lot of places. So if these three things are taken care of, industries will come automatically, because this is a segment which can only grow from here. And there is a lot of potential, and there is a lot of requirement and willingness also from industry to actually invest into the agricultural landscape. So to develop a self-sufficient food system, we need to address, as I said, like what we need to address on how do we build the capacity of the smallholder farmers, how do we ensure that we have the right infrastructure, so that we can, whatever we are producing, we are able to harvest what we can see on the ground, on the field, and then how do we process it and those kind of support which is required. So that I answered in my previous in your previous question. So that is what is the need of the hour. With climate change is, we've been talking about climate change for a while now, and then finally the reality has hit us, and it has hit us probably earlier than what anybody would have anticipated. Olam Agri runs a large rice farm in Nasarawa state. We have around 13,500 hectares of land, wherein we cultivate 4,450 hectares twice a year. So that is 4,450 hectares means like 7 kilometers by 12 kilometers. That's the area that we do. It's a fully mechanized farm, wherein we get around close to 5 tons of yields in per season. This is paddy per se. So, and we use the same varieties. So I'm saying that it is quite gettable by just doing the basic things. We also have over close to 100,000 farmers in various parts of business, be it maize, be it soy, be it rice, paddy, wherein through these outgrower smallholder farmers, we buy commodities from them. We are off takers, and also we provide a lot of support to the farmer. And in these parts, wherever we are working with these farmers, we have seen that by focusing on the basics, by using the right fertilizer, right, by using the right amount of water, by using the right amount of other inputs, the farmer yields can be improved to at least the basic average world levels, and then from there it needs to be built up to the potential of that particular seed and the varieties that we use. So those things can be done. We have seen that. Just to give you another data point is that our fertilizer usage is very, very low. So I'm not here saying that we should use a lot of fertilizer, but we need to have soil testing done and ensure what is the compound which is missing in certain soils, because soil to soil, geography to geography, every parcel of land would be different. They have its own. So soil nutrition is very, very important. R&D is very important in this climate change situation. So we need to have more focus on R&D facing the farmers, like understanding the needs of the farmers in a particular region and solving those problems. So that is what is a need of the hour. Soil nutrition and soil health is very, very important, and hence what kind of fertilizer are we using? Is it a chemical fertilizer or is it a biofertilizer? So more stress on the biofertilizer side, so that the soil can be maintained forever. That if you use a lot of normal fertilizers that people use, after 10 years, 12 years, that lands have gone. You need more and more fertilizers, you need more and more waters. That's not the way to go. But the way to go, so hence we need to understand that these are not solutions which can be just copied and pasted across regions. Soil testing is very important, which is very simple. There are mobile units, small units which can be done. That support needs to be given to the farmers. Specifically on the climate change, so in the let me speak about the rice farm in Nigeria, the Nasarawa state that Olam Agri runs. Out of this 4,450 hectares, we have around 5 or 6 weather stations at various places, and right from 2019 we have seen the way the climate has started behaving very erratically, right? So rainfall patterns have changed, the drought patterns have changed, the dry spell patterns have completely changed. It's very difficult now for us to predict what exactly is happening or what the next season will entail, whether the farming window is changing in certain areas. So because to get out of all this situation at the moment, it's quite difficult. Everyone in the world is talking about it, thinking about it, what to do and how to do these things. But at the same time, I believe a lot of R&D, again, I'm stressing on that point, is required. How do we develop these varieties which can be drought resistant, which can be flood resistant, which can be lodging resistant? By lodging, I mean that a crop, a maize or a paddy crop or any other crop which is standing, when wind blows, now the wind speeds have also increased, the paddy lodges, it goes down, right? That crop goes down and it is a complete waste, and if it falls in water, it's completely gone. You cannot even salvage anything out of that. So research is required. Seed varieties are required which is tolerant to all these problems, resistant to all these issues, and the kind of pests and diseases that come in resistant to that. So that is what is going to help us out of this climate change situation. Then bringing in technology, right? We have a lot of apps today, a lot of AI generated apps today, weather forecasting. So if the farmers are already told in advance that this is how the climatic condition is looking for the next, it's a forecast, it may change, but at least you have a visibility that okay, for the next 10 days you're going to have a drought cycle, so they know how to plan for the irrigation. If we are going to get, say, heavy rains in the next 10 days, then they know how to plan for their drainage. How do they reduce the use of water already which they would be using in certain crops. So those things can be mitigated to a certain extent by bringing in basic technology that we have today. And then again in the dry season, how do we ensure that we build irrigation facilities? So we only do around 80 to 90% of our crop food comes from the wet season cropping. The same lands can produce the same kind of commodity that we grow in the dry season also in the same kind of quantities, or the lands, right? The good point is that only 4% of Nigeria's water, the available fresh water, is used for irrigation purposes. So there is a scope that we can use more water. That water is there, it's not that it's not there. So if that water is used properly, if there are irrigation facilities developed in these areas, then we can also have 2 crops, right? So if we can develop that, it'll come in handy for us. Yeah, so bringing in technology is the only solution to ensure that how do we mitigate the weather risks. And of course, avoiding the emissions, carbon emissions and stuff like that, sustainability. So doing agriculture in a very sustainable way is very, very important. And these kind of trainings and teachings have to be imparted to the farmers as well. In today's world, how do we avoid emissions, how do we reduce our carbon footprint is very, very important. Yeah, so we are doing a project on that along with GIZ, wherein it is called CORE, which is carbon offsetting rice emissions. So teaching farmers how to use very minimal amount of water, minimal amount of fertilizers, and grow yields as well as, that will reduce your carbon. Yes, so say private sector can play a big role in any of these environments, right? In any environment, not only in the agricultural food systems, they can play a big role. So because in the agri sector, the produce, suppose if there's a processor and if that processor or a seller of a food, ultimately the value chain starts from the farmer, right? So if the private sector can play that role, can ensure that they work with as closely with the farmers as possible, like a lot of us do, like in the rice value chain, there are many companies who operate in Nigeria, who are millers, who also have outgrower farmers, who do some contract farming and who are also even thinking about getting into their own farming. So if we can go back and, work with the farmers closely and impart these knowledges, what we are doing, for example. So just to give you an interesting example is that we have a tie-up with Hello Tractors, who are doing an excellent job. So we have given these tractors through them, harvesters through them during harvest seasons to 35,000 odd farmers a couple of years ago, and we have seen their yields improve by 47%. Right. So if the private sector gets involved, if they implement these kind of solutions, for example, how do you support the farmer with fertilizer, subsidizing the fertilizer cost? Fertilizers are almost 45 odd percent cost to the farmer. So when all these, if something can be done there, if we can give the right kind of fertilizer, if we can do help the farmer with doing soil testings. So private sector can key into each and every aspect of that. Private sector can get into a business of the mechanization part. It is a business case to be. It's not charity. I'm saying, right. Charity is not sustainable, right. But corporate responsibility and sustainability is. So if you have to get something in return, which is like if we do something, we need to get that produced. We can buy at market prices. So this is what everyone is doing, and then corporate or private sector can play a very big role in all this. Yeah. On the part of the government has, as I said, basically what the government must do is policy, is infrastructure and security. If that is done, I believe the private sector will happily jump into it and make it work. It's all about data. We need to have visibility. As I said, when we talk about suddenly a food inflation or a food prices going up, and then we all talk about food insufficiency, and people start talking about various commodities. So if we have the right data of what we are producing, how much we are producing, what our yields are, how much lands are we cultivating, so that gives us a basic forecasting mechanism. That gives us a basic data, basic understanding of where is the problem, right. Agriculture systems, you will have small little issues here and there because of climate, because of weather, because of pests, disease and various other things. So if there is a small problem somewhere, that data will ensure, that data will tell us that the problem is only very little than being made out, right. And hence how do we, so that will give us a lot of leverage and understanding to ensure that we attack the right problem and only to that limit, not in excess, not under, not over. So the right amount of intervention where it is required. There will be times when you will have a crop failure, you will have a certain issue, but only that thing can be sorted out, right. So if we know that in a certain commodity we have a small gap coming in, we can see that, okay, in a certain commodity, do we have any excess production that has happened? How do we now intervene and divert that and tell the industry or tell the people to now, okay, focus your attention on this. So data is very, very important. Without data, there is nothing that we can do. We cannot analyze anything. So that data needs to be captured, that data needs to be analyzed, that data needs to be used to drive strategy and to drive process on ground.